To set up with a flat barbell bench press, lay in a supine position on the exercise bench that is parallel to the ground. Grab the barbell with a pronated grip approximately 1.5 times shoulder width. Retract the scapula, which is done by bilaterally concentrically contracting the middle trapezius and is assisted by the bilateral concentric contraction of the latimus dorsi, rhomboid major and rhomboid minor. Then depress the scapula by bilaterally concentrically contracting the inferior trapezius and pectoralis minor. Reaction and depression of the scapula simultaneously will cause posterior-medial movement of the scapula in the frontal plane. Extend the lumbar region of the spine by bilaterally concentrically contracting the multifidus, cephalospinalis thoracix, and erector spinae muscles, which include the iliocostalis, longissimus, and spinalis. This will cause an arch in the lumbar region of the spine. Have 5 points of contact for the bench press: the posterior part of the head, superior part of the back, and the posterior part of the gluteal region on the bench, and inferior part of both feet on the floor firmly planted. Lift the barbell up off the rack and bring it level with your shoulders. The prime movers for the bench press are the pectoralis major, anterior deltoid, and triceps brachii. In the lowering of eccentric phase of the bench press, the movements that occur are horizontal shoulder abduction in the transverse plane, and elbow flexion, shoulder extension, wrist flexion, hand flexion, and flexion of the phalanges in the sagittal plane. These movements work against the resistance of the barbell and weights in conjunction with gravity. Horizontal shoulder abduction occurs at the glenohumeral joint by the bilateral eccentric contraction of the agonist muscle pectoral major and the synergist muscle, the anterior deltoid. The rotator cuff muscles, which include the superior spinatus, infrapinatus minor, and subscapularis, stabilize the humeral head in the glenoid fossa. Elbow flexion occurs by the bilateral eccentric contraction of the elbow extensor muscles, which are the triceps brachii and ancogyes. Slight shoulder extension occurs from the bilateral eccentric contraction of the pectoralis major and the outer deltoid, as well as the bilateral concentric contraction of the antagonist muscles, which include the latimus dorsi, teres major, and posterior deltoid, which slow down the barbell on the eccentric phase of the bench press against resistance and gravity. The leg drive is a part of the bench press that allows the athlete to generate a more stable and powerful movement during the concentric phase. One of the main benefits of using a leg drive when engaging in a bench press is engaging in the correct lifting form of the trunk on the bench. This eliminates engaging the wrong muscles and strains from developing in certain muscles that might be overused. A leg drive also increases the stability of the thorax when lifting, by having your feet firmly planted on the ground when it allows the thorax to remain still on the bench, thus encouraging the use of the thoracic muscles when lifting the weight. In the concentric phase of the bench press, horizontal shoulder adduction occurs at the glenohumeral joint by the bilateral concentric contraction of the pectoralis major and the anterior deltoid. The antagonist muscles, being the latimus dorsi and posterior deltoid, relax, performing an action called reciprocal inhabilitation. Elbow extensions occur in the sagittal plane by the bilateral concentric contraction of the triceps brachii and ancogyes. Some degree of shoulder flexion occurs by the bilateral concentric contraction of the pectoralis major and the anterior deltoid in the sagittal plane. During the lifting of the weight in a bench press, the agonist muscles that are used in the thorax are those of the shoulder flexors and horizontal adductors, pectoralis major, anterior deltoid, and biceps brachii. The action of the shoulder joint is that of flexion and horizontal adduction, as well as abduction in the shoulder girdle, specifically the serratus anterior and the pectoralis minor. When lifting the weight, the pectoralis major concentrically contracts, which then forces the shoulder forward, keeping the shoulder girdle retracted near the top to lift the pectoralis major from entering active insufficiency as they continue to contract. Even though the pectoralis major is engaged at the lowest point of the lift, they appear to assist the triceps and anterior deltoids throughout the upper and middle range. Both the sternal and clavicular heads of the pectoralis major transversely flex the shoulders during the lifting phase of the bench press. Thank you for listening to our presentation.